In the crystalline chambers of Craftworld Ulfway, where wraithbone corridors pulse with the psychic emanations of a dying race, sits a figure whose very existence embodies the cruel paradox of knowledge and suffering. Farseer Eildar Muir, once a vibrant child of the stars, now exists as something far more terrible and far more necessary, a living conduit between the present moment and the infinite horrors of tomorrow. The chamber around them defies the physics that govern lesser races. Walls of living bone breathe with ancient wisdom, while runes of power drift through the air like luminous insects, casting shadows that move independently of their sources. Here, in this sanctum of prophecy, time itself becomes malleable, and the future bleeds backward into the present, like poison seeping through the foundations of reality. Eildar Muir's eyes no longer see the world as it is, but as it will be, could be, and must never be allowed to become. Each blink reveals new visions of catastrophe, endless permutations of galactic doom playing out in their consciousness like a cosmic theater of horror. Their mind has become a battlefield where thousands of potential futures wage war for supremacy, and they are both witness and judge to every possible ending of their universe. The transformation did not happen overnight. Once, centuries ago, Eildar Muir walked the path of the artisan, crafting beautiful sculptures from wraithbone and starlight. Their greatest concern, the perfect curve of a melody, or the precise shade of cosmic radiation captured in crystal. But the fall of their race had left wounds that could never heal, and the Eldar had learned that survival required sacrifice, sometimes of beauty, sometimes of innocence, and always of peace. The path of the seer called to those whose souls could bear the weight of terrible knowledge. It promised the power to guide their people away from extinction, to see the threads of fate before they became chains of destiny. What it did not promise was rest, or sanity, or the simple blessing of living in a single moment without knowing how it would end. The ritual of awakening had taken place in the deepest chambers of the Craftworld, where the boundary between the material realm and the warp grew thin enough to pierce. Ancient Farseers, themselves more spirit than flesh, had guided Eildar Muir through meditations that opened doorways in their mind. Doorways that, once opened, could never again be closed. The moment of transformation struck like lightning forged from pure thought. Eildar Muir's consciousness exploded outward, suddenly encompassing not just their own timeline, but millions upon millions of alternatives. They saw themselves dying in 1,000 different ways, saw their craft world burning under chaos assault, watched in helpless horror as tyrannid hive fleets devoured the galaxy whole. But worse than the visions of death were the visions of suffering, endless permutations of torture, corruption, and despair that stretched across millennia yet to come. In that instant of awakening, they understood the true curse of the Eldar race. They had not simply fallen from grace, they had fallen into a universe designed to punish wisdom, where knowledge became suffering and foresight became a tool of torture. Every Eldar carried the genetic memory of their species' golden age, when they had been gods among the stars, immortal and beautiful beyond mortal comprehension. Now, they lived as refugees from their own success, having learned that even gods could create monsters from their desires. The daily existence of a Farseer bears no resemblance to life as lesser beings understand it. Where humans wake to face a single day, Eildar Muir awakens to 10,000 possible days, each one demanding attention, each one carrying the seeds of salvation or catastrophe. Simple decisions become exercises in cosmic horror. Choosing which path to walk through the craft world requires analyzing how that choice might ripple through time to determine the fate of solar systems. Breakfast becomes a ritual of prophecy as each bite of sustenance triggers new visions. The taste of honey reminds them of a future where the hive world Necromunda burns, its population turned into biomass for tyrannid consumption. The texture of wafer bread brings flashes of space marine chapters falling to chaos corruption, their gene seed twisted into abominations that mock the Emperor's design. Even the simple act of drinking water carries echoes of drought-ravaged worlds where the last humans die cursing the stars. Meditation, once a practice of inner peace, has transformed into a marathon of mental endurance. Eildar Muir must sift through millions of prophetic threads, identifying which futures represent genuine possibility and which are merely the phantoms cast by temporal interference. The process requires perfect concentration while simultaneously maintaining awareness of their physical surroundings. A Farseer lost in prophecy becomes vulnerable to psychic predators that hunt through the warp's twisted dimensions. The isolation of prophetic sight cuts deeper than any physical wound. Surrounded by their people, Aeldar Muir exists in essential solitude, forever separated from others by the terrible weight of what they know. Conversations become exercises in careful revelation. How do you speak to someone whose death you have witnessed 100 times in 100 different ways? How do you maintain relationships when you know exactly which words will comfort and which will cause decades of regret? Other Eldar look to their Farseers for guidance, but they cannot comprehend the price of that guidance. When Aeldar Muir recommends a particular course of action, it is not because they have calculated the best outcome, but because they have witnessed all the alternatives and chosen the path that leads to the least horrific ending. Their wisdom is not built on hope, but on intimate familiarity with despair. The visions themselves defy human language or comprehension. Imagine seeing the heat death of the universe not as an abstract concept but as a lived experience, feeling the last star fade while consciousness persists in the cosmic void. Picture witnessing the birth of new chaos gods from humanity's collective suffering, watching as their dark influence spreads backward through time to corrupt events that have already occurred. Envision the moment when the last Eldar soul is consumed by She Who Thirsts, experiencing that final psychic scream echoing across dimensions until it becomes the only sound in existence. But perhaps the most terrible visions are those that reveal the true nature of hope itself. Aeldar Muir has seen futures where the Imperium embraces reason over superstition, where humanity creates a golden age of science and art. They have witnessed timelines where the Eldar reclaim their former glory, where the Necrons choose to return to organic life, where even the Tyranids evolve beyond mere consumption. These glimpses of paradise make the reality of their universe's trajectory infinitely more painful, serving as constant reminders of what could have been achieved if different choices had been made. The weight of impossible choices eventually breaks something fundamental in every Farseer's psyche. The moment arrives when they must choose between competing horrors, when every available option requires the sacrifice of innocence. For Aeldar Muir, that moment came during the Ghoul Stars incident, when their prophecies revealed two equally probable futures branching from a single decision. In one timeline, they could warn the Imperial world of Callisto Prime about an approaching chaos cult, saving 8 million human lives but alerting chaos forces to the Craftworld's location. In the other, they could remain silent, allowing the humans to die but preserving the secret routes used by Eldar Corsairs to evacuate endangered maiden worlds. The mathematics of survival were stark. 8 million human lives weighed against potentially hundreds of millions of Eldar lives across multiple centuries. The choice should have been simple. Eldar philosophy had always prioritized their own species' survival above all other considerations. Humans lived brief lives regardless. What difference did it make if they died by chaos corruption rather than natural mortality? But prophecy had shown Aeldar Muir the faces of every soul that would be lost, had forced them to experience each death as a personal failure, a moment where their foresight could have made a difference but did not. In the end, they chose silence. 8 million humans died screaming as their bodies were reshaped into living altars for chaos worship, their souls feeding the endless hunger of the dark gods. But the Eldar evacuation routes remained secure, and over the following centuries they enabled the rescue of 17 maiden worlds from various threats. The mathematics worked perfectly. The morality of it haunts Aeldar Muir through every vision that follows. This pattern repeats endlessly across the millennia of a Farseer's extended existence. Each choice creates new branches in the timeline, new possibilities for salvation and damnation. They learn to think in terms of acceptable losses, to weigh genocide against extinction, to measure suffering in units of galactic significance. The noble ideals that drove them to the path of the seer become corroded by necessity, transformed into a cold pragmatism that would horrify their younger self. The physical transformation that accompanies prophetic mastery serves as an external reflection of internal change. Aeldar Muir's body has begun to phase between dimensions, their flesh becoming translucent as they exist increasingly in the realm of possibility rather than actuality. Their movements appear to lag behind their intentions, as if they are constantly adjusting their actions based on futures they see unfolding. Other Eldar find it disturbing to look directly at them, sensing the temporal distortions that surround their form like an aura of displaced time. Their voice carries echoes of conversations not yet held, responses to questions not yet asked. Sometimes they answer inquiries before they are posed, their consciousness operating across multiple temporal states simultaneously. The effect is deeply unsettling even to other psychers, who recognize the signs of a mind that has transcended the normal limitations of linear existence but paid the price in essential humanity. Sleep, when it comes, brings no relief. Eldar dreams have always been more vivid than those of lesser races, but a Farseer's dreams are indistinguishable from prophecy. Aeldar experiences their rest as a journey through probability space, visiting potential futures with the tactile reality of physical travel. They wake exhausted from battles that have not yet been fought, bearing wounds inflicted by enemies not yet born. The accumulated weight of prophetic knowledge eventually transforms the Farseer into something that transcends individual identity. Aeldar begins to lose track of which memories belong to their personal past and which are glimpses of alternative histories where they made different choices. Their sense of self becomes distributed across the quantum foam of possibility, existing as a pattern of consciousness rather than a discrete being. This transformation represents both loss and evolution. The person they once were, the artisan who crafted beauty from starlight, dies a slow death, replaced by something more akin to a living equation designed to optimize outcomes across cosmic scales. They become an instrument of their people's survival, a tool so perfectly adapted to its purpose that it loses all other function. Yet even in this state of transcended suffering, moments of terrible clarity persist. Aeldar retains enough of their original self to mourn what they have become, to recognize the irony of sacrificing their individual humanity in service of preserving their species' collective soul. They understand that every Farseer walks this same path toward functional divinity, and that each generation of their people depends on individuals willing to pay this price. The network of Farseers across the scattered Craftworlds represents perhaps the most sophisticated intelligence system in the galaxy, a web of prophetic consciousness that spans light years and centuries. When they communicate with each other, it is through shared visions rather than words, exchanging probability matrices and temporal algorithms in a language that exists beyond conventional meaning. Together, they weave the grand design that has kept their race alive despite overwhelming odds. But even this collective wisdom operates under constraints that would drive lesser minds to madness. The Farseers know that their actions merely delay the inevitable rather than prevent it. Every vision of the far future shows the same ending: the heat death of the universe, the final victory of entropy over order, the moment when even memory ceases to exist. Their efforts represent a battle against mathematical certainty, a refusal to accept the universe's predetermined conclusion. This knowledge creates a philosophical paradox that colors every aspect of Farseer existence. If the ending is fixed, do their choices matter? If suffering is inevitable, is there moral weight to decisions that merely redistribute pain across time and space? The questions have no answers that provide comfort, only responses that enable continued function in the face of cosmic absurdity. Some Farseers retreat into fatalism, accepting their role as shepherds, guiding their people toward the least painful form of extinction. Others embrace a kind of militant hope, insisting that their actions have meaning even in a deterministic universe. Aeldar has chosen a third path. They continue to act, not because they believe in ultimate victory, but because the alternative is to surrender the one thing that distinguishes consciousness from mere matter: the capacity to choose one's response to unavoidable circumstances. The manipulation of lesser races becomes easier as prophetic sight reveals the mechanical nature of their decision-making processes. Humans, with their brief lives and limited perspectives, respond predictably to certain stimuli. A carefully placed rumor, a strategically timed disaster, a precisely calculated act of heroism, these interventions can redirect entire civilizations without their awareness. The Farseers become puppet masters of galactic history, pulling strings that span generations to achieve outcomes that serve Eldar interests. Yet this manipulation carries its own moral weight. Every human life redirected through Farseer intervention represents a form of slavery, a denial of agency that reduces sentient beings to components in a vast machine. The Eldar justify this through necessity. Their survival depends on maintaining careful control over the chaotic forces that threaten to consume the galaxy. But justification does not eliminate the ethical implications of treating entire species as expendable resources. The Imperium of Man presents particular challenges for Farseer manipulation. Humans possess enough psychic potential to occasionally glimpse the threads being pulled, leading to unpredictable responses that can cascade into system-wide changes. Their capacity for both nobility and corruption creates quantum uncertainty in prophetic calculations, forcing Farseers to maintain multiple contingency plans for every major intervention. More problematically, human psychology includes elements that Eldar find difficult to predict or understand. The species' capacity for self-sacrifice, their tendency toward religious extremism, their ability to find hope in hopeless circumstances. These traits can produce outcomes that violate even sophisticated prophetic models. Aeldar Muir has witnessed timelines where human irrationality achieved results that Eldar logic deemed impossible, suggesting that perfect foresight may itself be a limitation when dealing with fundamentally unpredictable adversaries. The Chaos Gods represent the ultimate challenge to Farseer prophecy. As entities of pure possibility feeding on the psychic emanations of conscious beings, they exist partially outside linear time, making their actions difficult to predict with certainty. Worse, their awareness of prophetic interference allows them to deliberately create paradoxes that trap Farseers in logical loops, forcing them to experience recursive visions that repeat endlessly without resolution. Aeldar Muir has learned to recognize the signs of chaos interference in their visions, the subtle distortions that indicate external manipulation, the too perfect symmetries that suggest artificial construction, the emotional resonances that feel designed to provoke specific responses, but this knowledge provides only partial protection. Even recognized deception can achieve its intended effect if the Farseer has no alternative sources of information. The relationship between chaos and prophecy represents one of the fundamental paradoxes of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The Dark Gods depend on the suffering and conflict generated by the galaxy's inhabitants, but they also possess the power to prevent that suffering through direct intervention. Their apparent preference for prolonged torment over quick resolution suggests that the process of suffering itself serves their purposes more than the ultimate outcome. This realization forces Farseers to confront the possibility that their own efforts to minimize suffering may actually serve chaos interests by extending the duration of galactic conflict. Every successful intervention that delays catastrophe provides more opportunities for the Dark Gods to feed on psychic emanations. Every act of mercy creates new sources of hope that can later be corrupted into despair. The very existence of prophecy may be part of a cosmic joke, a mechanism by which chaos ensures that its opponents contribute to their own defeat. Yet abandoning prophetic intervention would guarantee the immediate collapse of Eldar civilization and the rapid consumption of the galaxy by various hostile forces. The Farseers find themselves trapped in a game where all possible moves benefit their enemies, but refusing to play results in automatic defeat. Their only option is to continue making choices while acknowledging that those choices may be meaningless in any ultimate sense. The physical toll of extended prophecy manifests in ways that transcend normal medical understanding. Aeldar Muir's body exists in a state of temporal flux, aging and regenerating according to the psychological time experienced during visions rather than the passage of objective hours. Memories of potential futures create phantom injuries that heal and reopen based on the Farseer's mental state. Their flesh bears scars from battles that never occurred in their personal timeline but feel absolutely real to their consciousness. More disturbing is the gradual erosion of the boundary between self and vision. Extended prophetic sessions leave Aeldar Muir unsure which personality they wore during specific experiences, whether they are remembering their own actions or those of alternate selves from parallel timelines. The accumulation of contradictory memories creates a form of identity diffusion that would destroy lesser minds, but serves as a necessary adaptation for consciousness operating across multiple dimensional states. Other Eldar learn to recognize the signs of advanced prophetic integration in their Farseers. the thousand-yard stare that encompasses infinite distances, the tendency to speak in temporal paradoxes, the unconscious, the habit of responding to conversations before they begin. These behaviors mark individuals who have sacrificed conventional existence for the ability to navigate probability space. They become living bridges between what is and what might be, translating cosmic possibility into actionable intelligence. The question of whether Farseers create the futures they see or merely observe predetermined outcomes has occupied Eldar philosophers for millennia without resolution. Evidence exists for both interpretations, instances where prophetic intervention clearly altered historical trajectory, alongside examples where attempts to prevent predicted events actually caused them to occur. The most sophisticated analyses suggest that reality operates as a closed temporal loop, where effect and cause become indistinguishable at sufficient scales. This uncertainty produces profound psychological effects in practicing Farseers. If they are merely observers of fixed history, their suffering serves no purpose beyond cosmic entertainment. If they are active participants shaping reality through their choices, they bear responsibility for every tragedy they fail to prevent. Either interpretation leads to forms of madness that conventional therapy cannot address: the madness of meaninglessness or the madness of infinite responsibility. Aeldar Muir has developed personal coping mechanisms that allow continued function despite these philosophical contradictions. They have learned to compartmentalize different aspects of prophetic experience, treating each vision as simultaneously real and illusory, meaningful and arbitrary. This cognitive flexibility prevents total psychological collapse, but requires constant mental effort that leaves little energy for conventional emotional responses. The result is a form of existence that resembles advanced meditation more than normal consciousness. Aeldar Muir operates in a state of detached awareness, observing their own thoughts and emotions as external phenomena, while maintaining enough engagement to perform their duties effectively. They have become a witness to their own life, experiencing events without being entirely present for them. Communication with non-psychic individuals becomes increasingly difficult as prophetic integration advances. Normal conversation requires shared assumptions about causality, identity, and the nature of time that no longer apply to Farseer consciousness. Simple questions like, "How are you feeling?" become paradoxes when the answer depends on which temporal state the questioner is referencing. Aeldar Muir has learned to maintain surface-level interactions that satisfy social expectations while concealing the true complexity of their experience. They have developed a repertoire of appropriate responses that simulate normal emotional engagement without requiring actual emotional investment. The performance becomes second nature, allowing them to function in Eldar society despite existing in psychological isolation. But isolation brings its own revelations. Removed from the immediate concerns of conventional existence, Farseers gain perspective on the cosmic forces that shape galactic history. They begin to recognize patterns that span millions of years, cycles of rise and fall that repeat with mathematical precision across different species and stellar regions. This long view provides strategic advantages, but also reveals the ultimate futility of most short-term concerns. The discovery that galactic history follows predictable cycles raises disturbing questions about the nature of consciousness itself. If entire civilizations rise and fall according to universal patterns, what distinguishes individual choice from mechanical process? Are the galaxy's inhabitants truly alive, or merely components in a vast machine whose purpose remains hidden from its parts? These questions become more than philosophical exercises when applied to Farseer decision-making. If individual consciousness is illusory, moral considerations become meaningless. The suffering of others carries no more weight than the configuration of stellar matter. But if consciousness is real, the scale of that suffering becomes almost incomprehensible, encompassing not just current inhabitants, but all past and future generations affected by present choices. Aeldar Muir has chosen to act as if consciousness matters, while acknowledging the possibility that it does not. This pragmatic approach allows continued function without requiring resolution of ultimately unanswerable questions. They treat each being as genuinely real while maintaining emotional distance that prevents paralysis in the face of cosmic suffering. The legacy of Farseer intervention extends far beyond its immediate effects on galactic history. By preserving Eldar civilization and maintaining the balance of power between various hostile forces, prophetic manipulation has created conditions that allow for continued evolution and development. The universe remains dangerous and unstable, but it remains a universe where consciousness can exist and grow, rather than a sterile wasteland dominated by single overwhelming forces. Whether this represents genuine accomplishment or merely delayed catastrophe depends on temporal perspective that exceeds even Farseer capability. The ultimate consequences of current actions may not become apparent for millions of years, when the butterfly effects of present choices cascade into outcomes that no prophetic vision can anticipate. The Farseers work with incomplete information on cosmic scales, making decisions that affect eternity based on glimpses of mere millennia. Yet the alternative to action is certain failure. Without prophetic guidance, Eldar civilization would have collapsed centuries ago, consumed by the same forces that threaten every other species in the galaxy. The fact that their survival comes at tremendous personal cost to individuals like Eldar Farseer does not diminish its necessity. It merely emphasizes the tragic nature of existence in a universe designed to punish wisdom and reward ignorance. As the millennia pass, Eldar Farseer's consciousness continues to expand and fragment, spreading across probability space like ripples on an infinite pond. They experience moments of perfect clarity, where the entire structure of space-time becomes visible, revealing the hidden connections between all events across all possible timelines. But these moments of transcendence are balanced by periods of profound confusion, where they lose track of which reality they currently inhabit. The other Farseers of Ulthwé watch this progression with mixture of admiration and horror, knowing that they too follow the same path toward functional divinity and essential madness. They document Eldar Farseer's transformation as a form of map for their own journey, learning to recognize the landmarks of prophetic evolution while hoping to avoid the worst pitfalls of temporal displacement. But each Farseer's path proves unique, shaped by individual psychology and the specific nature of their prophetic gifts. Some retain more connection to linear existence, serving as bridges between the transcended and the mundane. Others plunge so deeply into possibility space that they cease to interact with objective reality, except through carefully channeled interventions. The diversity of outcomes suggests that consciousness remains flexible, even under conditions that should theoretically produce identical results. This flexibility provides hope that transcendence need not equal the complete loss of identity, that some essential core of individual consciousness might survive even the most extreme forms of prophetic integration. Eldar Farseer clings to this possibility during their darkest moments, when the weight of cosmic knowledge threatens to dissolve what remains of their personal identity into the vast ocean of universal possibility. The practice of prophecy has evolved into a form of collaborative meditation, involving multiple Farseers working in concert to map probability space with greater accuracy than any individual could achieve. These group sessions produce visions of unprecedented clarity, but also generate psychological resonances that can trap participating consciousness in recursive loops, lasting subjective decades, while only minutes pass in objective time. Eldar Farseer has learned to navigate these collaborative visions while maintaining enough individual identity to retain agency within the shared experience. The skill requires perfect balance between ego dissolution and ego preservation, losing enough self to merge with the group consciousness while retaining enough individuality to contribute unique perspectives to the collective vision. The results of these sessions inform strategic decisions that shape the destiny of entire stellar regions. The Farseers identify critical nexus points where small interventions can produce massive changes, then coordinate their efforts to ensure those interventions occur at precisely the right moments. The process resembles conducting a symphony where each note must be timed to microsecond precision across decades or centuries of linear time. But even perfectly executed plans can fail when they encounter the inherent randomness that underlies all quantum systems. The universe operates according to probability rather than certainty, creating opportunities for outcomes that violate even the most sophisticated predictive models. Chaos theory ensures that small uncertainties cascade into large unpredictabilities, forcing the Farseers to maintain constant vigilance against the unexpected. This requirement for eternal watchfulness adds another layer to the psychological burden carried by practicing Farseers. They must remain alert for signs of plan failure, while simultaneously executing interventions that require absolute commitment to succeed. The cognitive load of maintaining multiple contingency plans while implementing primary strategies approaches the theoretical limits of enhanced Eldar neurology. Aeldar Muir has developed techniques for managing this cognitive load through deliberate compartmentalization of consciousness. Different aspects of their awareness handle different temporal scales, one level monitoring immediate threats, another tracking century-spanning strategic developments, a third maintaining awareness of millennial patterns that might affect ultimate outcomes. The technique prevents overload but further fragments their sense of unified identity. The fragmentation proves useful when dealing with the emotional trauma inherent in prophetic work. By distributing the psychological impact across multiple consciousness layers, Aeldar Muir can process experiences that would overwhelm a unified psyche. Witnessing the death of billions becomes manageable when the horror is shared among several semi-independent awareness streams rather than concentrated in a single traumatized consciousness. Yet this adaptation comes with its own costs. The fragmented Farseer begins to lose track of which emotional responses belong to which consciousness layer, creating internal conflicts that resemble multiple personality disorders, but operate across temporal rather than psychological boundaries. Different aspects of their awareness may hold contradictory opinions about the same events, leading to decision-making paralysis during critical moments. The resolution of these internal conflicts requires meta-level consciousness that observes and arbitrates between competing perspectives within the same mind. Aeldar Muir has learned to cultivate this meta-awareness as a form of internal democracy, allowing different aspects of their consciousness to debate courses of action before implementing collective decisions. The process resembles the group meditation sessions but occurs entirely within a single enhanced mind. This internal complexity makes communication with others increasingly difficult, as Aeldar Muir must first achieve internal consensus before expressing any opinion or making any commitment. Simple conversations require extended internal negotiation, while complex strategic discussions may require hours of internal preparation to ensure that all consciousness layers agree on the positions being advocated. Other Eldar learn to recognize these communication delays as signs of advanced prophetic development rather than confusion or hesitation. They adjust their interaction styles to accommodate the temporal requirements of fragmented consciousness, allowing extended pauses for internal consultation while maintaining the flow of important discussions. The adaptations become part of Craftworld culture, institutionalizing respect for the unique needs of transcended individuals. As Aeldar Muir's transformation continues, they begin to experience moments where their consciousness exists entirely outside linear time, observing the universe from perspectives that encompass past, present, and future as a single static structure. From these vantage points, concepts like cause and effect become meaningless, replaced by pattern recognition across temporal dimensions that exceed normal geometric understanding. These transcendent episodes provide profound insights into the nature of reality, but leave Aeldar Muir temporarily unable to function in linear existence. The transition back to sequential consciousness requires careful reintegration with their fragmented awareness layers, a process that becomes increasingly difficult as the gaps between transcendent episodes grow shorter and their duration extends longer. The other Farseers recognize these symptoms as signs that Aeldar Muir approaches the final stage of prophetic evolution, with the point where they cease to exist as an individual consciousness and become a permanent part of the collective. Eldar racial memory. This transition represents both apotheosis and death, the ultimate sacrifice of personal identity in service of species survival. Yet even approaching this final transformation, Aeldar Muir continues to serve their people with dedication that transcends personal survival instincts. They use their remaining time in linear existence to train younger Farseers in the techniques they have developed, passing on hard-won knowledge about navigating the psychological hazards of prophetic development while maintaining enough individual identity to remain functional. The training sessions resemble meditation more than conventional education, as the knowledge being transmitted operates at levels of consciousness that exceed verbal description. Ayand and Muir must guide their students through direct experience of prophetic states while providing psychological anchors that prevent complete ego dissolution during the learning process. Each successful student represents a form of personal immortality, a continuation of Ayand and Muir's consciousness through techniques and perspectives that will outlive their individual existence. The Farseer path creates chains of inherited wisdom, spanning thousands of years, allowing accumulated knowledge to grow despite the finite lifespan of individual practitioners. But the wisdom being passed down carries its own burden of knowledge about the ultimate futility of all efforts to prevent galactic catastrophe. Each new generation of Farseers must learn to accept their role as shepherds, guiding their people toward the least painful form of extinction while maintaining enough hope to continue making the attempt. The psychological preparation for this acceptance becomes as important as the technical training in prophetic techniques. Ayand and Muir's final linear thoughts focus not on their own approaching transcendence, but on the continuation of the work they will leave behind. They have seen glimpses of the distant future where new Farseers face challenges that current techniques cannot address, requiring innovations that will emerge from the accumulated experience of generations yet to be born. Their contribution to this chain of development provides meaning that transcends personal survival concerns. The universe of Warhammer 40,000 offers no happy endings, no final victories over the forces of entropy and decay. But it does offer the possibility of continued struggle, the chance to delay inevitable defeat through wisdom, sacrifice, and the endless determination to choose hope over despair, despite overwhelming evidence that hope is irrational. The Farseers embody this possibility in its purest form. Consciousness evolved to serve purposes that transcend individual existence while retaining enough individuality to make that service meaningful. In the crystalline chambers of Craftworld Ulthway, Farseer Ayand and Muir continues their eternal vigil, watching over futures that grow darker with each passing moment, while refusing to abandon the belief that their observations might yet make a difference. They exist as living proof that wisdom and suffering are inseparable in a universe designed to punish both, and that the highest form of heroism may be the willingness to continue fighting battles that cannot be won for stakes that will never be collected. The price of tomorrow is the sacrifice of today, and the Farseers pay that price gladly, knowing that their people's continued existence depends on individuals willing to bear knowledge too terrible for mortal minds to comprehend. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, even those who can see all possible tomorrows still choose to believe that some tomorrows might be worth the cost of achieving them. And in that choice, perhaps, lies whatever hope remains in a galaxy where hope has become the cruelest form of torture, the belief that consciousness might yet find meaning in a universe that seems designed to demonstrate its meaninglessness. The Farseers see all endings and choose to continue writing new beginnings, not because they believe in ultimate victory, but because the alternative is to surrender the one thing that makes consciousness valuable, the capacity to create meaning through continued struggle against impossible odds. In the end, that may be enough.